Thank you very much, and I'd just like to say a few comments about Mary. Maureen and I were talking just a few minutes ago. So what you need to know about me is that I'm a senior citizen, and this is my third retirement project. So I intend to live for a very long time, and I'm just getting started. Now, I have known Mary. We did the math, Maureen and I, because I had to go to the numbers lady. I have known Mary for 56 years because Mary was my sister's best friend in grade school. So we reconnected just after I started Silver Sherpa about 5 years ago. And my sister said to me, "You have to talk to Mary Bart." And I kept saying, "Mary Bart, Mary Bart, Mary Bart." We had coffee. I went, "Oh, it's Mary." So there you go. So Mary has created a wonderful organization, as you know, called Caregiving Matters. It's quite extraordinary, and every time Mary calls me with a new idea, which is often, I just stop what I'm doing and say, "Okay, I'm in." Wherever I am or whatever I'm trying to do that day, I want to be involved, because I think the magic that Mary brings is that she brings people together. She brings experts to the podium, but then she videos it and sends that out again to anybody in the country for free. So how cool is that? So that's why we're here. Okay, so I've brought you some slides. Mary, and the slides will be up on the screen. Let me just go through this and write down your questions as we go, because I really do want to get through Crisis 1 and Crisis 2. Because I live in a world of crisis management, so I really do want to get through the ideas, and then I'll save at least 10 minutes at the end for questions. So write down your questions as you go, and then we can talk about it. I don't know about you folks, but one of the ways I learn is through stories, telling stories. So I'm thinking about writing a book, actually, because in the Silver Sherpa experience over the last 6 years, you wouldn't believe the people I've met, but the stories I can tell. I thought, I'm a trauma therapist, right? Like, I'm one of those people with, the movies, the rubber boots, in the trauma room, saving lives, one of those people. So I've been trained to be calm under fire. However, since I've got into the business of elder care and helping families, the things I see these days and the things my team sees, you can't make it up. You wouldn't believe what's going on out there. It's shocking, and it's getting worse. I'm not going to tell you all the numbers because I'm sure some of the other speakers have. And if you go on our website, we've got all sorts of blog articles you can read. It's free. Entertain yourself. If you want a little bedtime reading, go under the section on Human Resource Reporter. There's technical articles there that I've written, or Lawyers Daily. So there's lots of stuff there for you to read. So I'm not going to go through the numbers. We're an aging population, and we're aging rapidly. And our government services that the politicians keep telling us healthcare is free in this country, and and I know it's not free. We do a pretty good job, and I can say this because I'm recognized as a healthcare expert. In Canada, I can say that we do a pretty good job in acute care. So if you have a stroke, or if I have a heart attack and you get me to an acute care hospital fast enough, chances are they do a pretty good job. And our acute care system is a very good system. The problem starts when you come out of the acute care system and you have to move your mom or yourself or your sister back into the community, but you still need health care. And has anybody found it really easy to do that, and it's just a piece of cake? It's peachy keen? No, it's not. Okay, So what we see today is only the tip of the iceberg, because you know the demographics in Canada, our aging population's going like that, and who's going to help us? Because if we're in crisis now, figuring out how to integrate care, what's it going to be like in 2 years? What's it going to be like in 3 years? It's only going to get more complicated. Worse. Not just complicated, you said it. It's going to get a lot worse. So, Mary's asked me to speak about crisis management. So, one of the things you'll get to know about me over the next 45 minutes is I like to bring some humor to the most awful situations, because I think as human beings, you know, even if you're in the direst straits, if you can find something that's humorous, sometimes it helps. Sometimes it helps you get through the day. So forgive me if I make jokes. I'm not saying it's not serious. I'm just trying to get through some of these stories. So the ABCs of caregiving, the first thing I mentioned to you about Silver Sherpa. Why Silver Sherpa? So I'm on my third retirement, as I said, and I started this company. It's a professional services company, because if you're on the other end of caregiving, what you need to do is you need to combine all this healthcare, personal care stuff with legal understanding. And we talked about powers of attorney earlier, and I know Lisa's going to follow me. She came in, so she's going to talk even more. I believe she's a lawyer, and she's going to talk about personal care, powers of attorney, all those good things. But if you think about it, when you're trying to get your parents or your loved ones out of an acute care setting into the community, you've got to deal with not just healthcare, not just 8 doctors. I think we were talking about 8 doctors before. Has a doctor, you know, they don't call you back, and they don't use email, and you know the problems of dealing with 8 doctors all at the same time. It's pretty difficult. So healthcare, legal, because you've got to have the proper documents in order to act for someone, and financial. Unfortunately, today you need to think about money for personal care. So let me tell you a story. At university, I played hockey. I don't know why now, but I did then. And I played a lot of women's hockey. I was a right winger. The problem was I'd get hit in the right knee and go down on my left hip. Hip replacement time. So 2 years ago, I had to have an emergency hip replacement. Now this was shocking because it came on in about 6 months. Long story short, I picked the surgeon because, you know, I hang out with doctors and lawyers and all these people, right? So I knew what I wanted. I knew the type of surgery, everything about it. The surgeons, of course, that I know hate operating on me because they say, look, stop telling me what to do, because I'm a trauma physiotherapist too, so I know what angle I want the bone to be at later. Stop telling me what to do, but you need a hip replacement. Do you know what the cost was for me out of pocket? Now, I wanted to be rehabilitated back to a point where I could get back in my kayak, okay? So, you know, today they say, well, you can have four visits with the physiotherapist, which means you can move your walker from here to there. And I looked at them and said, no, not with this cookie. I want to get back in my kayak. Maybe I can't run, but I want to skate. And they went, oh, well, you know, you're 64. I'm just getting started. The cost to me to rehabilitate back to the level I wanted to, and it wasn't super duper, you know, join the Maple Leaf trainer team, $10,000 was what it cost me. All the stuff you have to rent. Has anybody had a hip replacement in the crowd?
No, but I've had double knees.
You know what I'm talking about. Everything from the walker to the raised toilet seats to and then I get to the hospital and they say, well, I'm sorry, you know, we're really short-staffed on the surgical floor. I kid you not. At night, we only have one nurse on and all she does is give medicine. So if you want to go to the bathroom, you should have I just had a hip replacement at 4 p.m. this afternoon. You should either have your husband stay overnight with you. I could tell you how that went over. Or get a personal support worker in, because there won't be anybody on duty to help you until 8 a.m. because it's Thanksgiving weekend.
Are you serious?
I'm serious.
Holy Murgatroyd.
Holy Murgatroyd. So we had to hire a personal support worker because I was sure I'd have to go to the bathroom between midnight when my husband left and 8 the next morning. So this is what's happening today. And if it happens to me, who knows people, imagine what's happening out there to our families in our communities across the country. So that's why we want to talk about crisis management. And that's why I set up Silver Sherpa to say, look, we've got to combine healthcare, financial understanding, legal understanding, and then put it all in a package where we can actually make all these crazy systems work together so that we can move our seniors around the system. What a concept. But if you think about it, nobody's doing that. Okay, so crisis one. Let's talk about the midnight crisis. I don't know about you, but I've got two elderly parents, which is why I started this company. My dad passed away last July, or just a couple of months ago in July. How many of you think that caregiving is only going to go on for a few weeks or a few years? Think again. My dad's plan was, I'm going to die with my boots on. The problem was the boots kept on walking, and they walked for 17 years. So I was his power of attorney. He was in Parry Sound, I was here. Guess where my mother was? Leamington, southwestern Ontario. You do the loop. It's not, you know, a lot of our families, a lot of our caregivers, they say to me, oh, it's okay, it's just going to be another 6 weeks, don't you think? So the first thing you need to do is get a grip, because this could go on for a long time. One of the things about our acute healthcare system in this country is we keep people alive a long time, right? So you can linger a long time in a debilitated state with a lot of extra care that maybe you didn't expect, right? So my dad, 17 years. He went well beyond any prediction by any doctor in the country. He was only supposed to live for 6 years, and he lived for 17. He had very good care in a long-term care facility in Parry Sound. So, crisis one, midnight. Love those midnight phone calls, don't you? So let's, if there's an emergency call, there we go. 86-year-old mom, this is a classic call that we get at Silver Sherpa, and it's an illustration, perhaps. It will sort of help talk about some of these things. 86-year-old mom in her house, 88-year-old husband with Alzheimer's who cannot be left alone. Mom feels numb all down the left side of her body, and she pushes the emergency alert pendant that her daughter insisted that she have before she falls. So what's your plan? We get calls all the time from daughters and sons who live somewhere else in the country or live outside the country, and this is what they say. And we say, well, what's the plan? And they go, what do you mean? Well, folks, it's like landing a 747, right? My dad was a pilot. I did a lot of flying in my youth. Okay, dad's 88, mom's 84. She's been the primary caregiver to dad. 84-year-old women wear out eventually. Dad can't be left alone. Did somebody, like you're on final approach, did somebody not think, what happens if something happens to mother? What do we do with dad? So let's talk about planning. Why is it so important? This healthcare maze. I call it the maze. Now, I'm allowed to say that because I'm a healthcare professional. And no one else can criticize me in the healthcare profession because they know that I will talk about how big a maze it is. So let's say we've got mom down here in the red circle, and she's ended up in hospital. Just this story that this case we're staying with. Okay, so mom goes in, and by the way, who's looking after dad? Because when the paramedics show up, they now start panicking because dad's on the loop. You know, dad's woken up, there's an emergency, he gets frightened, he's got Alzheimer's. The paramedics clue in and go, whoa. Now, what do you expect them to do? Is there a neighbor? Well, then mom passes out. Now they've got a comatose lady who's probably had a stroke, who they need to get to the hospital quickly so they can give her clot-busting drugs. There's only a few hours we can do this. What do you do now? So she gets into this maze, and then she gets into the hospital, and then the kids fly in. And we find a neighbor maybe. The daughter finds a neighbor to take dad for the night. That's one night. You got 24 hours. So now what's the plan? Mom gets into the healthcare system, and she's going to need treatment, acute treatment, for probably 2 weeks. Then she needs rehabilitation. And they're not sure how much of her cognitive abilities are going to come back from the stroke. So you're looking at a 3 to 6 month time frame here before we really know what's going on with mom. So think about this. You get into the healthcare system and you're going to go round inside the healthcare system. But what about dad? So one of the options might be, and you know you can't just ring the bell and call somebody up and say, well, I need a long-term care bed. Could you have it ready for me tomorrow morning? Because my dad's got Alzheimer's and he can't go home and we're in a crisis. And they go, well, yes, you and 34,000 other people in the province. But you can't just sign dad in. It's a process. So what do? What are the alternatives? Family, friends, neighbors, help, maybe somebody from the church, a respite bed, perhaps in a private retirement facility. But dad's got Alzheimer's. He wanders. He's a flight risk. That increases the price. So now we start to worry. Well, today, some of our staff are working this weekend, and you know what they're doing? Trying to find beds in retirement facilities that will take seniors who are being discharged from hospital on Monday. There aren't very many beds around, even in the private system right now. So you begin to see what this maze looks like. So the daughter comes in, and the first thing, okay, I've got to get respite for dad. So dad's got to go to retirement living. Well, that's going to be, oh gee, it's, it's on a locked unit. It's about $7,000 a month. Okay, now we need to get access to some funds because they don't have that kind of money in their checking account. They do have some assets, but guess what? The daughter's not the power of attorney. She goes to the bank and they know dad's got Alzheimer's and he can't sign. And mom's had a stroke and is comatose, and the daughter goes to the bank and they said, well, are you the power of attorney? And she says, no. And I'll leave the rest of those questions for Lisa around power of attorney and powers of attorney around banks. I don't want to get into that. There was a question previously, but I'll ask her to address that. So you can see very quickly how you get caught up in the maze, because then you've got to deal power of attorney. Do you know where everything is? What's the plan? Then your brother phones up and says, we get this a lot, the sister's the power of attorney for personal care, perhaps, and the brother's the power of attorney for property. He doesn't want to spend the money. Why? Because he knows that there's money in the will and in the inheritance. And believe it or not, I've actually sat in rooms with a son and a daughter, both professional people. The daughter wants mom to go to a private retirement facility where she can get good rehab versus one where there's no rehab for her stroke. And the son has sat there and said to me, my job as power of attorney for property is to preserve wealth for the next generation. Wrong. That's your mother's money. It should be used for her care. The daughter disagrees. But because she is not the power of attorney for property, it becomes a fight. So at Silver Sherpa, we don't work with the run-of-the-mill family who can sort of figure this out on their own. Because if you pretty well can figure this out on your own, most people don't come to us. The people that come to us for help and that we work with are people who run into these kinds of difficulties, where it gets really difficult or you're not sure and you're worried about some piece of this plan falling apart, then call us. But if you're sort of okay and you're sort of got it figured out, most of the time we don't see those families. We do a lot of work with the courts, and recently, particularly in litigations, estate litigations, whether the senior is living or whether they've passed and there's another member of the family living. And now we've actually been written into minutes of settlement where the court has had to decide what's going to happen with these fighting powers of attorney. And we've been placed in several cases as an independent third party, so that the court has deemed the following things are going to happen, and that they've put Silver Sherpa in as an independent third party to help the parties care for their parents until they die, and to be the professional group in the middle on a day-to-day basis that makes sure there's proper care, that the costs are properly addressed, etc. So these things do happen. They're bad things, but they do happen. So how do you cope with a crisis? Now, I was delighted to meet Eleanor. I've seen Eleanor Silverberg as one of the previous speakers because I've seen a lot of her work and seen some of her interviews in the media and things. One of the things from our perspective on the crisis management side, because remember, we're in more of the crisis situation sometimes, there's 4 things you've got to think about. Number 1 is time. If you're working full-time, or you're caregiving for your partner already full-time, taking on a sister or a brother, again, you have to think about this because the time that's required to help people is extraordinary. On average, a daughter or a son in Ontario today with one parent who has dementia, not other serious things, but just one parent. Do you know what the average amount of time is? Rule of thumb?
20, 25 hours a week?
Somewhere between 10 and 20, yeah. So you can imagine somebody like me who runs 2 companies, 20 staff, I've got 20 people on the payroll. At any given time, life's a little hectic. I've got 2 daughters who are married. One's a doctor, one's a business executive, but they, little kids, little problems, big kids, big problems. Like my grandmother used to say, I've got a husband, I've got a busy home, things happen, right? So you can imagine, for me, a parent in Parry Sound, tick 20 hours until we got things settled down. A mom in southwestern Ontario in Leamington, tick another 20 hours. 20 and 20 is 40. I don't know anybody, and if you're thinking about your kids and your sons and your daughters, if your plan is to have them come and look after you, if they're working full-time and they've got a family, you got to think about that. So time is a huge issue. Next, expert knowledge, because we talked about the maze. If you don't have the knowledge to figure out how to get through all of those systems, reach out for help. Don't wait until you get into the crisis, because the expertise that's required to move across these systems, we're not just dealing with healthcare, we're not just dealing with personal care. Hiring a home care company is okay, that's a beginning, but they'll give you a personal care worker who maybe makes cheese sandwiches and cleans up, but they're not going to give you advice on powers of attorney, or they shouldn't. If they do, run out the door and call a lawyer. But see what I mean? Like, this stuff gets too complicated. A home care company can't help you with that disability tax credit form that Maureen was talking about. So where we play is trying to sort out all of these things as a professional services company and help you get the right advisors to help you out on this. Because otherwise you could spend hours and days and weeks and get not good advice and then have to back up and do it all over again. So reach out and ask for help if you need help. The Caregiving Matters website, here's my midterm commercial. There's a lot of good information on the Caregiving Matters website. If you're looking for information, go there first and listen to those podcasts. Okay, stressful decisions. Anybody stressed out caregiving? Anybody stressed? I always put 2 hands up when I ask if anybody's stressed out, and 2 feet too, and then I'd fall down. Talk about stressful. It's incredible. And then, on top of all of that, you get the zinger, which is money. And, I think on Hans Selye's stress scale, Selye's a great writer from the 70s and 80s who was the father of stress treatment in North America. And he's got this stress scale. Money, I think at the top is jail, is the most stressful thing that can ever happen to you. Then it's divorce or death. And then it's, the third one is money. And then I just sort of put it in there and I say, well, caregiving's right up there, maybe equivalent to jail. Because in a way, sometimes you do feel like you're in jail. So, you've got to look at all these stressors. So let's talk about planning for a crisis. So Silver Sherpa, just a quick, you know what a Sherpa is, right? Mm-hmm. See, that's what's wonderful about talking to people who are over the age of 50. They know what a Sherpa is. It's a market segmenter for you business people, because if we talk to audiences 40 and under, they go, Sherpa? What's a Sherpa? You guys know what a Sherpa is. You carry the pack up the mountain, you carry the pack down the mountain, you make sure that your client doesn't fall into an ice crevasse, and you get them down to base camp safely. Exactly. Do you remember who the most famous Sherpa was with Sir Edmund Hillary?
I don't remember his name, I can see his face.
Tenzing Norgay. Anybody been to Auckland, New Zealand? They've got a wonderful museum there about Sir Edmund Hillary, and there's a picture and a wax sort of statue of Tenzing Norgay. So there you go. That's where Silver Sherpa came from, via Auckland and all of that. Okay, so how do I plan for a crisis? First of all, think about your trusted circle, because we've got a lot of seniors now who are alone. I got into trouble on TVO, the agenda, for saying elder orphans. And I had doctors sort of say, oh my God, you can't call them elder orphans. Well, the fact of the matter is a lot of people call themselves elder orphans. If I was alone, I'd call myself an elder orphan. Why not? It's a good name, and it shows you exactly what's going on. Silver solos, we call them, if we have to be politically correct. But elder orphans, like let's say you outlive everybody else. We have clients who are 94 and everybody's dead. Their powers of attorney died. Their executors died. And they say, well, now what am I supposed to do? And it's a planning issue. So who's in your trusted circle? Because it doesn't have to be your kids, especially if they hate each other. Don't make them powers of attorney if they hate each other. We are so tired of mediating arguments with kids because they hate each other because mother loved you best and she always gave you the bigger piece of pie. Pardon? You're a preacher and you're a teacher and you tell me we're going to talk about pie? That's it. Honestly, guys, it goes back to that sometimes. So be very careful who's in your trusted circle. Some of you have church communities. I have a very strong church community. And in our circle with some of we've got two retired RCMP officers and a retired detective. And they will act as power of attorney for personal care if they can, one appointed and the other one provides oversight for special people that they've known for 50 years, if they've got no one else. So maybe it's in a trusted circle. I've spoken to retired police officers and put the challenge out to them, and within their union, they have identified certain officers that are retired, and if they've got some elder orphans in the crowd, those officers, with oversight by other people in the union, will act as powers of attorney in emergency, if there's nobody else. So think about who's in your trusted circle. And there's 3 doors that I want to walk through. Anybody been to Dublin? You know the doors of Dublin? Love the doors of Dublin. So I brought you some real doors from Dublin. So door number 1 is health and well-being. Door number 2, financials. Door number 3, wills and powers of attorney. Now, let me go to door number 1, the financials. I flipped it around. Why? We worked with a group of senior citizens to do a boot camp for them on senior planning and how to get ready. And the average age of the project team was 82, I think. So these guys knew how to be seniors, right? And they said to me, you shouldn't always start with door number 1 as health and well-being. And I said, why not? And there were half men and half women on this project team, which I thought was really cute. And the guys all said, well, you got to start with the financials because we die first and she doesn't know anything about the money. And I thought, okay. Out of the mouths of seniors come wisdom. And so that's why we start with door number 1, financials. What kinds of things are you going to worry about in planning ahead? Assets and liabilities, care costs. Do you know what the cost of home care is if you have to bring someone in 24 hours a day into your home, even on a temporary basis right now? Anybody want to guess?
They told us earlier, $7,500 a month.
I don't know who they're using, because I can tell you in this area right now we have clients, and if you have to call an agency for a referral out from hospital, 24-hour care, I mean round-the-clock care if you're out of the country, it's $24,000 a month.
Is that for a nurse?
No. That gets you a PSW. A nurse rings in at $150 an hour. So whoever's telling you $7,000 is, I would like to see. Now, there are some people that have live-in caregivers that they've been able to sort of collect from the neighbor or whatever. The only thing I would say to you, this is another whole topic, be careful that people have the right training and they apply to the right they know what the standards are, and that you have a contract with them, because there are all sorts of horror stories about caregivers who sued families when there was no contract. So, but I can talk to you more about that. Accommodation costs. So those are the care costs if you have to bring somebody into your home. Accommodation costs. Right now, and we're going to talk about this coming out of hospital, but in retirement homes, if you have to access a private retirement home, like the Chartwells or the Amicas or the, what else is in this area? Sunrise. Those are those private retirement homes, because you're waiting to get into long-term care. They come at extraordinary cost. if you've got higher care costs. So let me just give you an example. My mom's at a Sunrise because she has end-stage Alzheimer's. She's now at level 3 out of 4 levels of care. It's $8,500 a month. And that's pretty basic, and she's not a flight risk. Most of our clients who are at the Sunrises right now, if they're on the locked units, they're running between $10,000 and $12,000 a month.
What do you mean by flight risk?
It means that in their Alzheimer's, they will seek an exit and go out the door and get lost. So, a bit of a problem. Okay, let's go on to door number 2, health and well-being. This is where the seniors let me put health and well-being on door number 2. What if? With our clients, we play the scenarios, what if? What if mom has a stroke, dad's got Alzheimer's, she's the primary caregiver, the example I mentioned. What if this happens? What's your plan? And I know this is very difficult, but you need to start thinking ahead because there is no safety net for you. Unfortunately, you're going to have to do this yourself. There will be good discharge planners, there might be good people in the community, but you as the power of attorney or the son or the daughter or the spouse have to put these plans together yourself. Who would be your caregivers? Where would you like to be? And how do you want to live? Because this gets into some of the end of life discussions. Do you want a feeding tube in your stomach to keep you alive or not? That's something that I've already told my powers of attorney. Nope, I'm not going to go there. If I'm on a ventilator and can never come off and I've got you want to put a feeding tube in my stomach, it's not going to happen. Remember, I've got a doctor in the family, so you have to be really specific. Do you want this antibody? No, but we've got to start thinking about these things because in medicine today, we can keep you alive for a long time. Wills and powers of attorney. There's been some discussion about this morning. So in Ontario, there are powers of attorney for personal care, powers of attorney for property. Lisa's here and she's going to talk more about that. And so I'm not going to go into a lot of this, but in terms of thinking about this, in people terms, powers of attorney are for the living. I'm going to get t-shirts made up. Wills are for the dead. Okay? So think about this. If you're in a car accident, God forbid, and you live for 10 years as a quadriplegic, the person, and you're scrambled, you don't have capacity, you don't have the cognitive ability to make decisions for your own care. The person who will be making those decisions for you for the next 10 years is your power of attorney for personal care. So it's not just a tick box in your lawyer's office. It's not just, oh, you got a form off the internet, oh, that's cool. No, it's not cool. Because these people may be making decisions for you, okay? So it can be very difficult. And let me give you a story of a case that we were involved in, where we were called in because things were so difficult. The powers of attorney wanted dad. There were 2 powers of attorney and they hated each other. One wanted dad to go to the hospital. His second wife said, no, he wants to die at home. We had a palliative care team involved. Dad was being nursed at home. There was a fight in the courts about it. And unfortunately, the gentleman became much sicker and was on death's door. Both powers of attorney, who hated each other, called up separate funeral homes. Now, we were in the middle of trying to help the parties proceed. What happens is powers of attorney have control while you're living. The minute the gentleman passed away, control went to the executor of the estate. The executor was the son. The second wife was not allowed to come to the funeral. And I tell you that story because think about this, you know, it's not something that is a sort of a, you know, a legal thing that you think about once in your life with your lawyer and then you put it away. These are things that are going to affect us because as we live longer, these situations are occurring. Think about blended families. You know, where there's, I had one, a lawyer call me from Vancouver and she said, I have a problem, but I'm told you can solve it. And I said, I don't know, we'll see. And she said, well, my husband and I, this is my second marriage and I have a second family. And I got divorced in Ontario and all of my in-laws and others live in the Toronto area. And I said, oh, how many are there? And she said 8. And I'm power of attorney for all of them. And I said, well, if you don't mind my asking, how did you collect 8 parents? And she said, well, in the first divorce, husband number 1, his parents didn't like him, so they made me power of attorney. I said, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then in the new family, her second husband's parents are in the Toronto area as well. So she got his parents, but he'd been previously divorced, and the woman's parents came to him because they trusted him. So now she's got 8 elderly people all over the age of 80 to worry about. So I know you might be sitting here saying, oh my goodness, but if any of you have blended families, you have to think this stuff through, okay? So I'll leave that one for Lisa too. Okay, crisis number 2. I've set you up for a great talk, Lisa. I don't know what you're going to talk about before, but lots of questions. Crisis number 2. This one is coming on our desk almost daily now. Hospital is discharging mom or dad. Mom or dad have been in the hospital. You get the phone call, oh, we're discharging dad on Tuesday. Hang on, it's Friday at 6 o'clock. We need the bed. Flu season is coming, we're clearing beds. You have to take your dad out. Well, he's on the long-term care list. Yes, but there's a list and he won't be there for at least a year or more. In this area right now, your long-term care wait lists are around 4 years if you're not on a crisis list. It's better than down in Burlington, Oakville, where I come from. We just ticked over 5 years if you're not on a crisis list. So now you've got to come up with a plan. So mom is medically stable, but what are your options? Well, the discharge planner or the social worker or the nurse that you're dealing with says, well, here are the options. Home, and you go home alone. She can't go to the bathroom. She needs 2 people to get her up out of bed. She needs to be turned regularly. She can't eat without choking. And I work in Toronto. And I'm supposed to take her home. I don't have a hospital bed. Well, that's one option. We call it the home alone option, which is not a good option. 2, retirement home, home assisted living. What's the cost? What's the length of time? Because if the care costs are going to run $8,000 a month and you're going to be there for a year, that's a lot of cost. Number 3, government copay long-term care. All I can say to you is, how long is your waiting list? And you know what the answer is. It's not very good. Okay, so where are we? We're back to coping with the crisis. But the big message is you have to plan ahead. Please plan ahead for yourselves and for your family members too. Because if you don't, you're going to be calling us someday. And I don't want you to call us. I want you to be happy and have a plan, and then we can all work together and you can read Mary's website. So let me ask, Mary, can I have 2 minutes for questions? We can take a couple of questions. I did not do this presentation to depress you. I did it because I really want you to know the nurses, the doctors, the people we work with in the healthcare system, the retirement home owners, when I say to them, what do you want me to tell people? They said, would you please tell them the truth? Don't give them the fancy data. Don't give them the tick lists. Tell them the truth. Because this is what's happening today. And unfortunately, you're going to have to deal with it.